Next, we have House Bill 5387 by Representative Casimiro. Hold on a second. 5387. This is an act relating to domestic relations, marriage licenses. It requires a person to be at least 18 to obtain a marriage license. Representative Casimiro.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I really appreciate your time tonight, and I'm going to be brief because I know I have many witnesses who want to testify tonight, and I do believe you have a number of positive written testimonies on hand there as well. I feel like we're not getting those as frequently as we should because of the virtual testifying, but I know that you should have received a lot of very positive testimonies via written communication. But basically, this bill just makes, we have marriage right now at 18 in Rhode Island, but the law includes alarming loopholes. Right now, 16 and 17-year-olds may marry with parental consent, and children 15 and younger, without any minimum age specified, may marry with parental consent and judicial approval. If you think this isn't happening in Rhode Island, you're sadly mistaken. This human rights violation is happening quite frequently in Rhode Island. 32 children as young as 14 years old were married in Rhode Island between 2013 and 2019. 88% of those were girls who were wed to adult men. 2 of those children were married to a spouse where the age difference met the definition of a sex crime. So I think that we just need to clean up what's on the books right now, get rid of these loopholes that are affecting our children, and just stop sending our children home to get raped. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I do know there's a lot of people who want to testify on behalf of this bill.
Thank you, Representative Casimiro. Do any of the members of the committee have any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, we're going to call our first witness, Addison Array.
Hello?
Hi, Addison. You are with the House Committee on Judiciary, testifying on House Bill 5387. You have the floor.
Good evening, Chairman Craven and honorable members of the House Judiciary Committee. My name is Addison Array, and I'm here this evening to testify in favor of House Bill 5387. I recently became aware of this legislation and learned that there is no law in Rhode Island prohibiting a child from being married. I'm not going to repeat the statistics, but I want to inform you from a 13-year-old's perspective how childhood marriage is disgusting. As a 13, almost 14-year-old girl, I never even think about boys, and I could never imagine having the responsibility and obligation of being married. Not just to cook and clean, but to carry a child. Many childhood marriages were the younger girl and adult male. Most of the time, this results in forced sex. This would not be a crime since the two are married. Teenagers should not have to worry about being married, doing the cooking, cleaning, or being locked in the bedroom. The statistics show that not all were for this reason, they were for other reasons. But nothing changes the fact that no child should be forced into a marriage and have an obligation to run a household and do what they are told. I take pride in my education, and many people in this situation wouldn't be going to school. I think about my future all the time, and it consists of finishing high school, going to college, working, and then start building a family in my late 20s. I bet that many of the girls regret not living their life and doing something good with it. I called in tonight to ask all of you to support Bill 5387 and end childhood marriages.
Thank you, Addison, and thank you for your very articulate commentary regarding this, and it's good to hear from someone so young.
Thank you.
I want to thank Addison as well. She did a fabulous job.
Thank you, Representative Casimiro.
Thank you, Addison. Any questions of Addison's from members of the committee? And I just want to let everyone know that that is Rep. Noray's daughter that we just heard from. You should be very proud, Rep. Noray.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
And then to be honest with you, Addison is privy to a lot of our conversations because of Bluetooth, and she hears me talking about this bill to Tom. So this was all of her idea.
That's great, that's great. We got to get our kids involved. Next, we have Michelle Hanash, Director of Policy and Advocacy. Michelle, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Welcome to the House Committee on Judiciary. You have the floor.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chairs, and esteemed members of the Judiciary Committee. Thank you for providing me with this opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 5387. My name is Michelle Hanash, and I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at Unchained At Last, where we are working to enforce child marriage in Rhode Island and throughout the U.S. The current marriage laws make a mockery of Rhode Island's statutory rape laws. In Rhode Island, as mentioned, sex with a child under age 14 is a crime, as is sex between someone over the age of 18 and a 14 or 15-year-old. And yet, marriage at those ages is legal. As Rep. Casimiro mentioned, Unchained's analysis of data from the Rhode Island Center for Vital Records found courts approved 2 marriages between 2013 and 2019 with a spousal age difference that met the definition of statutory rape. In effect, the state court sent those children home to be legally raped. Sadly, Unchained has seen that one of the reasons children are forced to enter into marriage by adults, because remember, minors do not have the legal capacity to enter into marriage on their own, is it's adults who enter them into it, is to cover up rape, statutory and non-statutory. I would also like to point out that the age for consent to sex and marriage are completely different issues. The impacts of sex and marriage are vastly different, so there is no logical reason to equate the ages for them. Marriage before 18, unlike sex, devastates girls' health, education, and economic opportunities. Further, the age of consent to sex has nothing to do with legal capacity, but the age for marriage has everything to do with it. Therefore, sexual consent laws and marriage laws serve very different purposes. Consent laws are meant to protect children from sexual predators and pedophiles. They are found under Title 11 of the Rhode Island General Laws, entitled Criminal Offenses, and under Chapter 37, which is entitled Sexual Assault. They set the age limits according to which we send perpetrators to jail for engaging in sexual conduct with children. Marriage, on the other hand, is a serious, legally binding contract, one that brings legal obligations and responsibilities and is difficult, if not impossible, for a child to terminate if a child wanted to. The laws regarding marriage, therefore, concern one's legal capacity. Legal capacity is limited before the age of 18, which is the age of majority. It makes absolute sense that the marriage age is currently 18. What we need to do is remove the loopholes in the law that circumvent this protection of minors and greatly endangers them. Also, if a child does not wish to engage in sex before marriage, eliminating the loopholes that allow children to marry means that child has the option to just wait. For a child who is being forced to marry, eliminating the loopholes is the difference between life and death. It means not being raped on her wedding night and every night thereafter, and being forced into sexual and domestic servitude. States across the U.S., especially in the Northwest, are moving to end child marriage. New Jersey, Delaware, and Pennsylvania are among the 4 states that have already passed legislation to this effect. And New York and Massachusetts are among the 10 states currently considering the same legislation. Since Rhode Island does not impose a residency requirement for child marriage, it can easily become the Northeast new destination site for forced marriage, where parents take their children and force them to marry. House Bill 5387 harms no one, costs nothing, and ends a human rights abuse in Rhode Island. Unchained does respectfully request one amendment to the bill, which is to repeal Rhode Island General Statutes 14-1-5, subsection 4, which gives the court exclusive jurisdiction jurisdiction and proceedings relating to child marriages under 15-2-11, which is the section that governs the procedure for marriage licenses to minors. So it's just a technical correction. And so I would also like to mention our executive director is ready to testify. You might have tried contacting her, so I just want to make sure Frady Reese is contacted. But for these reasons mentioned, I urge you to vote yes on House Bill 5387 with just the one amendment requested, and I thank you so much for your time.
Chairwoman, I am totally fine with the requested amendment.
Oh, that's great. Good job. Well, thank you, Michelle. And are there any questions of this witness? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next witness, which is Frady Reese, the Executive Director of Unchained at Last. Frady, are you with us?
Yes.
Welcome to the House Committee on Judiciary. You may proceed.
Oh, that's great. Good job. Well, thank you, Michelle. And are there any questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on to...
Can you turn your TV off or something that you're listening to?
Yes.
Great.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Vice Chair and distinguished committee members. I am Frady Reese. I'm the founder and executive director of Unchained At Last, which works to end forced and child marriage in Rhode Island and across the United States through both direct services and advocacy. And I am testifying tonight as both a forced marriage survivor and an expert whose research and writing on forced and child marriage have been published widely. I urge you to vote yes on H5378 with one amendment. And I also want to give a special thank you to Representative Casimiro for introducing this important bill. There are many, many reasons to end child marriage, but I want to focus on one. Child marriage can too easily be forced marriage. And that's because the age of majority in Rhode Island when children become legal adults is 18. And children who have not yet reached the age of majority can easily be forced into marriage or forced to stay in a marriage, even if they're 17, even if they're extremely mature, because of their limited legal rights. So let me explain what I mean by that. Let's start with the basic right to leave home. A child who runs away from home before age 18, either to escape from an abusive spouse or to escape from parents who are forcing them to marry, can be deemed wayward, and the court may commit a wayward child to a training school for youth until their 19th birthday. Children do not have the right to open the front door and leave home. Besides, where would they go? Domestic violence shelters across the United States typically do not accept unaccompanied minors because of the legal liabilities that they bring. And a minor in Rhode Island is not allowed to enter a youth shelter without their parent or guardian's consent unless they are under the custody of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. Those fleeing a forced marriage often have complex legal needs. We see this all the time at Unchained. But contracts with minors, other than for necessaries, are voidable. So only the most generous attorney would agree to represent a child, even though the retainer agreement is a worthless piece of paper. And then perhaps most shockingly, a minor is not allowed to bring a legal action independently, only through a next friend or guardian ad litem, which means that a child is not even allowed to file for divorce until their 18th birthday. So think about that. Right now, children can be entered into a marriage by a parent and or a judge, and they're not even allowed to file for divorce. We ask minors to wait until 18 to enter into almost every other contract. We must also ask them to wait until 18 to enter a marriage contract to make sure they have the basic legal rights that they need to protect themselves from a forced marriage. And Representative Casimiro pointed out that 88% of the children who marry in Rhode Island are girls married to adult men. So they face all of these obstacles that I just listed, but their adult spouses have none of these obstacles or handicaps. But I just wanted to know that when children reach out to Unchained At Last and they learn about their limited options, many of them despair and end up turning to suicide attempts or self-harm because death seems like the only way out for them. We can do better in Rhode Island. But as Michelle Hanash testified, we are requesting that one amendment. It seems that the debaters just missed it, which is just to also delete Section 14-1-5, Paragraph 4, which would give courts exclusive original jurisdiction in proceedings relating to child marriages.
So H5387 is the rare, no-brainer legislation that harms no one, costs nothing, and ends a human rights abuse. So please vote yes with that one technical amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Friday, and thank you for your testimony. And I believe Representative Casimiro has already agreed to that amendment. Is that correct? Great. Any questions of this witness? Seeing none. Our next witness is Hillary Levy Friedman from Rhode Island Now organization. Hello, Hillary, are you with us?
I am here.
Welcome to the House Committee on Judiciary. You may have the floor.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm Hillary Levy Friedman. I'm president of the Rhode Island chapter of the National Organization for Women. My representative is Edie Agello, who I'm pleased to see on my computer screen tonight, and many other friends at the State House who I don't get to see in person. But I'm here tonight to say that children should not marry, and it's for this reason that Rhode Island Now supports H5387. So as you've heard, it turns out that in Rhode Island, children are able to marry because of this legal loophole, and it's really one that gives adults too much power. And this applies to those who identify both as male and female, though in the most recent cases in Rhode Island, it's minor girls who marry adult men. At the heart of this is the issue that child marriage is human rights abuse. We'd like to think this doesn't happen here in the Ocean State, but as you've heard, it does. And according to the United States Department of State, child early and forced marriage arises from and often perpetuates gender inequality. It is a human rights abuse. It is a human rights abuse that contributes to economic hardship and leads to underinvestment in girls' educational and health care needs. Child marriage puts all children in a legal black hole, but I'm going to focus on girls here. Child marriage imposes on a girl the duties and responsibilities of an adult wife, yet, as a child, she has no independent legal rights. To be clear, those who face little or no choice when they enter a marriage typically face the same if they want to leave it. This girl cannot hire an attorney. She's excluded from domestic violence shelters. If she walks out, she's a runaway child. She typically gets no support from her natal family. She cannot just go home when her relationship goes bad. She may be forced to stop her education, which has lifelong economic consequences. She may be forced to have children, again with lifelong consequences. And in some cases, the bride is simply too young to safely carry a pregnancy to term. And she's likely, of course, to be subject to unwanted sexual encounters. So the list of negatives goes on, but I will stop there. Moreover, I just want to point out, as has been mentioned, but it's so important to say that statutory rape is a serious crime, and we should not allow a coerced marriage to obscure that fact. So for all these reasons, Rhode Island Now urges passage of H5387, and we support any amendments proposed by the sponsors. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Any questions of this witness? Representative Knight.
It's a good bill. That's my question. That's all. It's a good bill.
That's good commentary. Well,
Thank you, Jason. Coming from you, that's big.
that's right, Julie. And next we have Max Robbins. Max Robbins, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Welcome to the House Committee on Judiciary. You may proceed.
Thank you. Madam Chairwoman and distinguished committee members, thank you for considering H5387 and giving me the opportunity to provide testimony. My name is Max Robbins, and I'm the founder and executive director of Students Against Child Marriage, the nation's only 501c3 nonprofit that's fighting the American child marriage crisis through student activism. We are a relatively new organization with nearly 50 chapters, almost 500 members, and over 8,000 supporters of all ages across the country, including right here in Rhode Island. Now, as other advocates have been testifying today and are continuing to testify, child marriage is a tremendous problem in the United States. It's a huge crisis in Rhode Island, and it's a top priority for our nation's youth. Our organization, in tandem with the other incredible advocacy groups here today, is raising unprecedented awareness about this issue. It's becoming a household name, and it's an urgent concern for your constituents. Today, Madam Chairwoman, I will be briefly discussing the fundamental nature of this issue. Simply put, child marriage is a human rights abuse. This practice has devastating, lifelong consequences for girls. The U.S. State Department has even gone so far as to call child marriage before 18 a, quote, human rights abuse. Now, the negative impacts of child marriage are profound. Girls and women in the U.S. who marry before 19 are 50% more likely than their unmarried counterparts to drop out of high school, and over 4 times less likely to graduate college. Women who marry as teenagers are 3 times as likely than women wed as adults to have at least 5 children. And girls in the U.S. who marry young are 31% more likely to live in poverty when older. These studies control for other variables. It's simple. Child marriage is the problem here. Now, if that's not enough, women in the U.S. who marry as children face a 23% higher risk of significant health complications, such as heart attacks, diabetes, cancer, strokes, than do those married between 19 and 25. This is what happens when a child is forced to raise a household. That's not even to mention the prolonged psychological complications and frequent domestic violence that survivors have to suffer through. Globally, women married before 18 are 300% more likely to be beaten by their spouses than those married after 21. These women experience lifelong psychiatric struggles. And I'll lastly note here that these outcomes are even worse for pregnant teenage girls. Those married before 18 have a 70 to 80% chance of getting divorced. Teen mothers who marry and then divorce are much more likely to end up in poverty. Madam Chairman, the members of this committee, child marriage is unequivocally a human rights abuse. Before you today is a rare, common-sense, no-brainer of a bill. As Michelle and Frady have spoken about, this legislation, it harms no one. It costs nothing, and it'll end the human rights abuse that is happening right here in your state and right here in your districts. I really want to thank Representative Casimiro for her leadership here, and for all of the sponsors and the co-sponsors of this bill, and for this committee for hearing this and really having the possibility of making some really important change here. Speaking on behalf of the nation's youth, we urge you to vote yes on H5387 with the amendments that Unchained At Last has mentioned that Representative Casimiro supports, and to please, please, please end child marriage in Rhode Island. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Max. Are there any questions of this witness? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next witness. Aliyah Abbas? Aliyah, are you with us?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Aliyah. Welcome to the House Committee on Judiciary. You have the floor.
Sure. Thank you so much. Good evening, Chair Craven, Vice Chair, and distinguished committee members. My name is Aliyah Abbas, and I'm a child marriage survivor and activist to end child marriage. As a child marriage survivor, I request you to please vote yes on Bill H5387 because it simply will put an end to child marriage without any exceptions. Voting yes would mean eliminating the abuse of placing children in the most vulnerable, hopeless, and abusive situations once and for all. So even though the marriage age here in Rhode Island is 18, the law does permit, these are the loopholes, that 16 and 17-year-olds to marry with parental consent. And it is parental consent, which is most often parental coercion, as were in my case as well. And the law also permits 15-year-olds and younger with parental consent and judiciary approval to marry. That is so alarming. Each of us here should be appalled at that. The fact that there is no minimum age of marriage in Rhode Island, that's very, very scary. Sex with children under the age of 14 is a crime. The U.S. Department has called marriage below 18 a human rights abuse, and a human rights abuse is never in the best interest of a child. Child marriage destroys girls' health, education, economic opportunities, and it also increases their risk of experiencing further violence, abuse, trauma, poverty. And this trauma that I speak of is lifelong. It requires a commitment of lifelong healing if the child escapes from this horrendous abuse. I wholeheartedly support this bill because it hits home. It's extremely personal. I am a product of child marriage, and who better than to know the reality of this injustice? I was 17 years old when I was taken out of school my senior year, and I was forced into a marriage without my consent. I had 3 pregnancies without my consent to full term. I was bullied, beaten, raped, and abused in all forms almost every single day of the marriage. I was forced into motherhood, but I'm going to stop here and just say that being a mother has been the most rewarding and fulfilling roles of my life, but it has been the hardest and the toughest job that I've ever had to do, and I'm still doing. I will not sugarcoat. I will not sugarcoat when I say that I don't know how I'm still here. I'm going to say something very personal, that I don't think without God, with the strength that God gave me, I wouldn't be here. But, you know, I should not have had to do that. I should have not had to carry that heavy burden and the load of, you know, responsibilities that no child should ever carry. No child should be forced into marriage in the first place. Marriage is not for children. I didn't have any support of anybody. I raised my children on my own. No support of family, no support of the community or friends. I was isolated. And even more so after my divorce, and taking my divorce was a risk. It was a life, it was a risk which I took. My uncle had told me clearly that the only way that I would leave the marriage is if I died. But I still took the risk because freedom for my children and for myself, and most importantly for my children, I was a mother of a daughter, was so important to me. I did not want her. I did not want the same people who forced me into the marriage and, you know, to force my daughter into that. No child should ever have to risk their life for freedom. No child should ever have to carry such a heavy load of responsibilities as child brides do. I wouldn't wish this upon anyone. And children under the age of 18 who get married are often denied any legal help. That is so important. That's so important to mention here. And that's why it's so important to raise the age to 18. The human brain isn't even developed until 25, but since the legal age here in our country is 18, it should be at least 18. So if they need to get out of these abusive situations, they can easily get the help that they need. So I urge you and I request you all to please vote yes on H5387, It will simply put an end to child marriage, and that is what we need to do. We need to step it up and protect our children. We need to protect our girls. It's about time that, you know, we make our country a safe space for our girls. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Aaliyah, and thank you for sharing your personal story with us. It puts real context to the bill, and I know it's not easy to do that, so thank you very much. Any questions from this witness?
You're so welcome.
Representative Casimiro?
I just want to thank Aaliyah for coming out and speaking from her heart like that. That was very emotional, and I appreciate it very much. And I hope we all take into consideration what she just said.
Absolutely. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Hearing none, we're going to go on to our next witness is Dawn Tyree. Dawn, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Welcome to the House Committee on Judiciary. You have the floor, so take it from here.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Chair Craven and distinguished committee members. I realize you had a late night, and I had to unplug, so if I'm sounding repetitive, my apologies. I'll make this as quick as I can. My name is Dawn Tyree, and I was forced to marry at 13 years old to the man who had been sexually abusing me. He was 32 years old. While my father consented, I'd like to talk about the judiciary investigation. Forced marriage is not something that's always visible, and there's no way that I would have actually told anyone, a social worker or a judge or anyone that might have been investigating whether or not I was being coerced into the marriage. I'd like to touch on the losses that myself and my family went through because of the child marriage. I was pulled out of school at 13 years old, so I have a huge gap in my education, staying home and mothering. When I did leave at 16 years old with 2 kids in tow, we lived in poverty for over 10 years, sometimes going without electricity or soap or basic needs. And the ripple effect continues through 2 more generations. I have 4 grandchildren, and my kids are in their 30s, struggling to survive. Not one of us has been able to complete college and get a degree. My daughter suffers from mental health issues and addiction. So I'm supporting this, and to me it's just legislation that harms no one, costs nothing, and saves lives. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you for sharing your personal story with us. I know how difficult it is, and it shows you have a lot of strength to come forward now. So I know the committee members appreciate your testimony, so thank you. Any of the members have any questions of this witness? Seeing none, we have one more witness, Jennifer Griffith. Jennifer, are you with us?
I am.
Welcome to the House Committee on Judiciary. Nice to hear from you. You have the floor.
How are you? Thank you so much. I am Jennifer Griffith, the child advocate for the state of Rhode Island, and I've been around long enough to know at this time of the evening to keep it moving and keep it short. I'm not going to read my letter that I had submitted to your clerk, nor am I going to, reiterate the well-articulated arguments of those who have gone before me. But I would say, as the director of the agency which oversees DCYF, I think it's important to close this legal loophole. As you know, for the job I requested and very much in love with, that we do see many victims of sexual assault, and I don't want to not include young boys as well. But in speaking about young girls, I just do want to point out that we do, with DCUF and at my office, uncover so many cases of sexual abuse. I do want to make sure that this is something, even though you would be able to receive parental consent, and I would use air quotes if I were with you, that parental consent or parental misguidance, I would say, could lead young girls into a situation from the woman we heard from tonight, we certainly don't want to promulgate any longer. So as a child advocate, I am in support of this bill, House 5387. Thank you, as always, to Rep. Casimiro for her support of issues that mean so much to the children and child welfare. And, of course, I'm willing to answer any questions as needed. But thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Hillary. Are there any questions of this witness? Hearing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 5387. Next, we're going to go... We're going to go back to Representative Casimiro's Bill 5387, which was the act relating to domestic relations marriage licenses. We have more witnesses that have called in since, so if you... Who is it? Amanda, are you with us?
I'm here, thank you.
You have the floor.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Vice Chair and distinguished committee members, for prioritizing a hearing on this important legislation. And thank you so much to Rep. Casimiro for her strong leadership on this issue. I'm Amanda Parker. I'm the Senior Director of the AHA Foundation, where we work to end the harmful practices, including forced marriage, child marriage, and female genital mutilation in the U.S., including supporting survivors and at-risk individuals to find safety and services. I'm here to record my strong support for H 5387, which would end all child marriage in the state without exception. You've heard about the two major exceptions that allow for minors to marry in the state. I just want to talk a little bit about those two in a little bit more detail. The parental consent loophole is absurd. In AHA Foundation's experience, when a child is forced to marry, the perpetrators are almost always the parents. So parental consent is often parental coercion, just like you heard from Aaliyah. It's also just a signature on a form. It does nothing to protect children from forced marriage. We've heard horror stories from our partners in this space about survivors of forced marriage who cried openly while their parents forced them to marry under a parental consent exception. And the clerk in most of these situations never even looked up. The judicial review process also does not protect children from forced marriage. The law does not specify any criteria a family court must consider before approving the marriage of a minor. This gives courts wide discretion to approve, for example, the marriage of a child who is too young to consent to sex, which we've heard tonight is being approved, or the marriage of a child to an adult who is a registered sex offender. The solution here is not to strengthen the judicial review process by adding safeguards, such as specific criteria judges must consider, or court-appointed attorneys for children. Even the most robust judicial review process has a fatal flaw. It puts the onus on children to find a safe way to communicate to a judge that they are being forced into marriage. We have worked with many survivors of forced child marriage who underwent a judicial review process, and for them, the process only caused further trauma in an already traumatic situation. They faced a horrific decision: be honest with the court and face the repercussions from their parents when they get home, or lie to the court and feel somehow complicit in their own forced marriage. We have never at the AHA Foundation heard of a single survivor who chose to be honest with the court in that situation. The parental consent and judicial approval processes effectively disempower children, allowing adults to enter children into marriage and providing little or no recourse for children who do not. H5387 harms no one, costs nothing, and as you've heard tonight, ends a human rights abuse. I urge each of you to vote to favorably advance H5387 without delay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda. Do any of the committee members have questions of this witness?
I just want to thank Amanda. She's been waiting a really long time to testify, so I just wanted to say thank you, Amanda. I really appreciate your support on this.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate your leadership on the issue. I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Amanda. And now we have our next witness, who is Rima Nashashibi. Rima, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
All right, welcome to the House Committee on Judiciary. You have the floor.
Thank you. Honorable Chair Craven, Vice Chair McKenzie, Vice Chair Knight, and other distinguished members. My name is Rima Nashashibi. I'm the founder and president of Global Hope 365. I rise to speak in support of H5387. Global Hope is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the lives of women and girls locally, nationally, by advocating for their safety through raising awareness, education, and empowerment. We're all about education and prevention. And our focus is on ending harmful practices towards women and girls, such as child marriage, human trafficking, and other forms of domestic violence. I thank you so much, and I'm going to be very, very brief. The U.S. Department of State has denounced child marriage as the human rights abuse in other countries that contributes to economic hardship. And my question to you, what about our country? What about our kids? I submit to you that the American Medical Association has called for an end to child marriage through passing a resolution stating child marriage is associated with higher rates of sexually transmitted infections, early pregnancies, divorce, and intimate partner violence than women married at age 21, in addition to a higher rate of infant and maternal mortality. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime issued a report just recently on the interlinkages between forced child marriage and human trafficking, which we all know involves fraud, force, and coercion and benefiting commercially by the receipt of payments from the use and abuse of another human being. Marriage was also observed to be connected to several different means listed in the Trafficking in Persons Protocol. It may be directly linked to kidnapping, fraud, deception, the abuse of a position of vulnerability, and the receiving of payments or gifts. Thank you so much for your generosity of time and for listening to our testimony. And we support the amendment to this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rima. Any questions from the committee of this witness?
Just wanted to say thank you. She's another one who was waiting to testify, so thank you, Rima.
Thank you so much.
All right,
You are all so kind. I know it's been a late night.
Well, that concludes the testimony. I believe that concludes Representative Casimiro, the testimony on 5387. We don't have anybody else here.
I'm not quite sure, because there were people waiting in the queue, but I'm not quite sure.
Well, if you find more, you let us know, right? We're going to have a changing of the guard in a minute, so you can let Chairman Craven.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Now, where's my bill?
Thank you.